Hey, welcome everybody to 9.1 Part 2. So in this part we're going to talk about joint variation and then kind of bringing it all together by writing different equations for inverse, direct, and joint. Alright, so for joint variation, it's called joint variation because there's more than two variables, usually 3 or 4. Here's the general format. Z equals kxy. K is still the constant of variation, same as it was before. And this situation, if I was going to say that in words, I would say Z varies jointly with X and Y is how that would be said in words. Z varies jointly with X and Y. And then the other thing you need to know is joint variation is actually also direct variation. So joint variation is when a quantity, your choice whether or not you write this down, but when a quantity varies directly as the product of two or more other quantities. When a quantity varies directly as the product of two or more other quantities. So the key word is it's direct variation really, but they're multiplied together with the K. Alright, so now let's talk about the difference when you're trying to make equations for these. So if it says Y varies directly with X, that means that the X is going to go with the K. I'm going to say, quote, on top. Sometimes there's nothing on bottom, but it's going right with the K. If you see inversely, that's when the X is going on bottom of the fraction. And if you see jointly, it's also on top. Let's do some practice. Look at example 3. So if I see H varies directly with K, and there's always, or sorry, it says H varies directly with X. There's always a K there. Directly with X means X goes right with the K. That's what I meant when I said on top. It doesn't really make sense to talk about a top and bottom because there's nothing on bottom, but really it's like a 1 on bottom if you want to think about it this way. Okay, so let's look at B. Z varies inversely with A. Alright, varies inversely means it goes on bottom of the K. Part C, Z varies jointly, X varies jointly with Z and H. So every single time it's going to follow these patterns, it's just going to be different variables, and it could be squared variables or all sorts of different stuff. So let's do D. So Y varies inversely with the square of X. So first of all, inversely means it's going to be on bottom, and there's always a K there. The square of X would be X squared. So my equation is Y equals K divided by X squared for that one. Alright, let's go more difficult. Look at E. Now, Z varies directly with Y, inversely with X. So that means Y is going to go on top with the K, X is going to go on bottom. Z equals KY divided by X. Part F. Y varies directly with X and inversely with Z squared. So directly with X, inversely with Z squared. Let me rewrite that so it looks a little nicer. So KX divided by Z squared. Part G, Y varies jointly with X squared and Z. So remember, jointly is where it means it's just on top or just right next to the K. So KX squared Z for that one. Last but not least, Y varies directly with the square of X, inversely with Z. So again, inversely on bottom, directly on top with the K. Make sure you write down questions if you have any on that. And the last part of our lesson, example 4, is to write a joint variation equation for a given situation. And this is actually very similar to what we did with example 2. Only this time I'm using my general joint variation formula. So they're going to give you this fact, Z varies jointly with X and Y. We know X, Y, and Z z. We're supposed to write an equation to start off with. So this is a thing again where we're going to first find k. We find k by using our formula. I'm going to plug in z, x, and y, and then I'm going to solve for k. So when I solve for k, I have 8 equals k times 8 divided by 8. K is equal to 1. So first find k, but that's not our answer. So our answer is only when I take my equation and plug in k. So z equals 1 times xy, or you could just, in this situation, since it's 1, you could just say z equals xy. But that is my first part of my answer. Now, part 2, just like we did with, for example 2, they're going to give us some variables. In this situation, they gave me what x was and what y was, and we're trying to solve for z. So x is -3, y is 5. When x is -3 and y is 5, it looks like z is -15. Alright, part B, similar situation, just a little bit more tricky numbers. So again, it says z varies jointly with x and y. That means I'm using my general equation. I know that x is -6, y is 3, z is 2/5. We're supposed to write an equation. So again, I have to find k, and my goal is to figure out what k is and then plug it in right here. So let's go for it. So z is 2/5, x is -6, y is 3. Alright. -6 times 3 is -18, and then I'm going to divide off the -18. So really what's happening is I end up with -1/45 for k. Alright, so there is my equation. That's a negative sign. It's just going into my fraction bar. Alright, and then part 2, solve for z when x is -3 and y is 5. So same thing we did before, just plug in x and plug in y, and then I'm going to figure out what that is. And I end up getting -15 over -45, so that would be 1/3. Alright, make sure you write down your questions. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in class.